These beams were supposed to be secured to the jack with nails and screws, but unfortunately that wasn't done. Hi, my name is Joseph Donahue and I'm a partner at Block O'Toole & Murphy, allowing him to be in the country, let alone work in the country. All he wanted was to put in a hard day's work for good pay. That brought him to this construction site where he was hired to work as a carpenter. At the time of the accident, they were building the outer structure of the building, and he was working in the basement using jacks to erect floor joists, which are beams to use to build a floor. The jacks were about 10 to 12 feet high, and on top of the jacks were 50-pound beams that were being used to build the floor above. These beams were supposed to be secured to the jack with nails and screws, but unfortunately that wasn't done. And while he was working on the ground below, one of the beams fell and struck him in the head, in the neck, and the back. As a result of being struck by the 50-pound wood beam, our client sustained injuries to his head, his back, his neck, and his left shoulder. His injuries were so severe that the New York City Fire Department had to bring in a crane and use a stretcher to lift him out of the construction site where he was taken to a hospital. In the days, months, and years that followed, he underwent extensive surgical procedures to repair the injuries that he sustained as a result of the accident. He required surgery to his neck and surgery to his low back. Unfortunately, the neck surgery failed, and he required a revision surgery to replace the artificial discs that had moved after they were put in his neck. He underwent a back surgery, a lumbar decompression. Following that surgery, however, he suffered from an infection, and that infection caused an abscess, which is a fluid-filled sac of infectious process in his back, which required him to undergo an additional surgery. He also had a surgery to his left shoulder and his left knee as a result of the accident, and because of the extent of his injuries, he was not able to get back to work as a construction worker, something that he really wanted to do, because he had young children and a wife, and his sole goal was to take care of his wife and his children through hard work. One of the most challenging aspects of the case was to get the defendants to acknowledge that he was lawfully employed at the site. He had been hired and had been working there for several days before the accident occurred. We were able to prove through discovery and depositions that he was in fact employed at the site and was working there at the time of the accident. The defendants tried to argue that our client was responsible for the accident because he was moving the jack that was holding the wood beam when the accident occurred. However, the evidence that we obtained during the course of the case showed that the beam was supposed to be secured to the jack because jacks were moved during the construction process. And the fact that the beam could fall was something that was foreseeable. We were able to move the court for summary judgment under Labor Law 240, a statute that requires owners and contractors to provide workers with a safe place to work and to provide the proper safety equipment to prevent them from being struck by unsecured falling objects. Our motion was successful, and the matter was ready to proceed to a damages-only trial, with the court having already determined that it was the owner and the contractor that were responsible for failing to secure the 50-pound beam. During the course of the case, we attended many settlement conferences with the court, but the defendants were not interested in having reasonable settlement discussions. So we asked the court to give us a trial date so we could take the case to a jury and ask them to make a decision on what fair and reasonable compensation would be for our client. The court granted our request and set a firm trial date. It was only then that the defendants agreed to sit down and have reasonable settlement discussions, and we were able to successfully resolve the case for $5,500,000. As a result of the settlement, our client was once again able to take care of his family. He was able to return and resume to paying bills, putting food on the table, and putting clothes on their backs. It enabled him to live with the same dignity he was living with when he was working hard, building buildings here in the city of New York. If you or a loved one are injured in a construction accident, it is essential to find attorneys that are willing to fight for you. If you are undocumented, you have the same legal rights as someone who was born and raised in this country. If you're here working hard, whether documented or not, you're entitled to the same protection of the laws as everyone else.